Good evening and welcome to this virtual gallery talk at the BYU Museum of Art. We are privileged to have with us artist Brian Kershisnik, and we thank you at home for joining us. Brian is the creator of this stunning painting you see here, titled Nativity, and tonight he will discuss his artwork and artistic process, and also answer some of your questions. We invite you to submit your questions regarding this painting or about Brian's process in the comments of this live stream. Please also include your name and city. We'll start with questions by children, so please let us know if you are submitting a question on behalf of a child, and if you'd like, tell us their age. This recording will be posted on YouTube and on our website, moa.byu.edu, around midday tomorrow, December 8th. Again, we're glad you are joining us tonight. Now let's hear from artist Brian Kershisnik.
Hello, and thank you very much. I made this painting about 15 years ago when I started it 15 years ago, about 100 yards from where we're standing. I was teaching temporarily here at BYU, filling in, a professor had retired, Bruce Smith, and I was a temporary replacement while they were looking for a permanent hire, and so I was just going to be teaching for one semester, so I could pour all my energy into that one semester. I didn't have to sustain that energy over a whole career of teaching, and so I wanted my students to be really ambitious, and that's also a problem for teachers because there's a lot of work then to grade. But because I had asked my students to be ambitious, I thought, well, I should be ambitious too. So my studio that was provided for me just here in the Harris Fine Arts Center, not far from here, from where I'm standing, the studio I had was about 8 feet wide, but it was very long, and there was a wall this size. And so I'd never done a painting this size, but I wanted my students to be ambitious, so I stretched this big canvas, and then what happened is what always happens to me when I begin an ambitious project like this. I became terrified of this big white expanse and thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to paint in this huge space? And now, unlike in my studio, which is typically a fairly remote practice and I don't have spectators, now suddenly there are students dropping in to see what I'm going to do on this huge canvas, and I just became progressively over the next few days more and more terrified of it. And so I had a few ideas, and I made some sketches in a sketchbook, but nothing was feeling adequate to this huge expanse of canvas. And but I was thinking a lot about something that had been happening for the previous 5 or 6 years of painting these witnesses. People refer to them as angels. I generally call them witnesses, kind of looking into the events of my paintings. And part of that is just driven by the sense of the cosmos that I have, that our proceedings are witnessed. But I thought I want to do a painting that really includes a lot of these witnesses or these angels. And I remembered the births of each of my children and thinking those were extremely, they felt like very populated events. And so I thought, oh my gosh, what would have been more populated than the birth of Jesus? And so I thought, I had not done a monumental scale sacred subject before, but I thought, yeah, I'm going to paint Nativity. And I did a little preparatory sketch that's about this big. If I showed it to you, it wouldn't mean anything to you. It was just kind of a very loose thing. It kind of had an indication of the flow of those witnesses, and an indication of the Holy Family. And in that little sketch, there were a couple of the more conventional animals often depicted in nativities. But when I had that little sketch, I just knew that I would lose my nerve if I didn't just get started right away. So I just took the charcoal and I walked right over to the top of Mary's forehead, and that's where I started, just right at the top of her forehead. Her profile was the first part that was drawn. And so I drew Mary, and I drew the little baby Jesus, and I was thinking a great deal about as I mentioned before, the births of my own children and the kind of alarming color of a newborn. I remember when my oldest was born, and the only reason I didn't panic is because no one else in the room seemed panicked at his color. It looked very alarming to me, but apparently he was fine, and he is fine. Healthy man. But and then I began to draw this river of witnesses, and spent probably a few weeks drawing them in, and got so carried away with them that I didn't leave any room for the conventional animals often depicted in the stable. And as I was doing this, I was referring a great deal to the scriptures about Jesus' birth, but we know almost nothing about Jesus' birth. Almost everything that we generally picture about his birth is made up later. Interestingly, I mean, to my recollection and to my search, even placing his birth in a stable is only implied because he was laid in a manger. That bit of furniture is the only thing that links his birth to having happened in a stable, and the reason that it was likely in a stable is because the only surviving mangers we have from that period are stone, and they would have been tricky to move around. But of course, if there were wooden ones, they wouldn't have survived this long. But I just, because in thinking about how little we know of the actual details of his birth and how much previous artists through the centuries and millennia have gone into those events with their imagination, I just determined that I would do the same and try to make a depiction of the birth of Jesus that was that was emotionally accurate rather than trying to achieve some sort of historical accuracy, which was just not available. And so, anyway, I will be happy to address your questions about this painting.
Thank you, Brian. We'll now open it up for questions from you, the viewers. Remember to submit questions in the comment section of this live stream. We will start with questions from our younger viewers. The first question comes from Olive, who is 6 years old and lives in Bountiful, Utah. She says, "I see puppies. Why did you paint them?"
I love that question, Olive. And there are a couple of things that you need to know. One is that I'm a dog person. I love dogs. That there is no mention of any dogs in the birth of Jesus. There is no mention of any of the animals in the stable. And so when I got so carried away painting all of these figures, these angels and witnesses coming, and just ran out of room for the conventional animals that I had previously anticipated painting, I wanted the animals to be represented in the painting, and so I decided to include a dog. And I don't know if I have a great answer for you, Olive, about why there are puppies, but I love puppies, and I also the mother dog is the only mortal figure in the painting that is aware of the angels. And I've had some experiences with my dogs and them being aware of things that I wasn't aware of, and so that's why I did that. Also, I'm fairly confident, Olive, that there were not Labradors in Palestine. I don't know that the breed was developed in that year yet. It was, but I have generally had Labradors, and I like Labradors. But anyway, that's why there are puppies, because I like puppies.
Wonderful. Our next question is from Asher, age 11, and he asks, how many hours do you paint a day, and what are some of your favorite things to create?
Oh, Asher, I live now in Salt Lake City, and my studio, I paint in two studios, one in Provo, here in Provo, and the other one is in central Utah in a town called Kanosh. And I go to each of those studios for about 3 days at a time, and paint as one thing about any job is there are often a lot more things to do than the fun part of the job. Painting is the fun part of the job, but there's organization and negotiations and things like that. But when I am painting and producing paintings, then I will paint for 10 or 12 hours a day, and I can actually only keep that up for a few days before I am worn out, and then I go back home. And I have my house in Salt Lake is an old house, and so there's plenty to do when I get there, other projects. But I don't paint when I'm at the house. But yeah, I love to paint, and when I am painting, I paint a lot and long hours.
Our next question is from 6-year-old Wade from Provo, Utah. He asks, are the girls next to Mary shepherds?
Oh, that's a good question. And no, they are not shepherds. They are midwives. The scriptures, of course, do not mention midwives, but it occurred to me while I was doing this painting that it would have been impossible. It's impossible for me to imagine that Mary would have not been attended. That if, again, this is all just imagination, but if a woman was having a baby in your garage, you would become aware of it, and you would go tell your mom, and your mom would go help her, And so what I know of midwives and what I know of the Jewish people, women would have come to help her. And also the midwives that I know, they're cleaning up the blood after the birth and smiling through kind of these beautiful, drastic circumstances like the midwives that I know. So they are not shepherds. These are midwives. The shepherds haven't arrived yet. These angels are going off to tell the shepherds. They'll be here in a couple hours.
The next question is from Thatcher, age 8, from St. George, Utah. He asks, why are all the angels going the same direction?
Well, Thatcher, kind of what I envision in my mind is that the birth of Jesus was something that had been promised from the beginning of people in this earth, before the beginning of people on this earth. And so everybody associated with this earth, everybody that had been born, everybody who was yet to be born, needed Jesus to come. And so everyone was interested, everyone was dependent on this event, not only his birth, but the success of his mission. And so everyone would be interested. So in my mind, everyone wants to see. Everyone wants to witness that it has happened. And it starts out with everybody kind of behaving and being, orderly. But order kind of breaks down as everybody's just trying to crowd in and just get a glimpse before they rush off to back home or off to tell the shepherds or wherever they're going. And so, but this is the beginning of the order as they're coming by, so everyone can see. I mean, if they're all coming in from all angles, they'd be knocking into each other, and it would be a problem. But the order is kind of breaking up. They're not in line anymore, and crowding in and looking over each other's shoulders and such. And so I assume that these people are they have seen, and they're going off, they're singing, and they're heading off to tell the shepherds and whoever else they told.
Our next question is from 8-year-old Nixon from Bountiful, Utah, who asks, do you think you were there when Jesus was born?
Oh, I hope so, Nixon. I think that whether or not everyone who wanted to be there could have been there, everyone was acutely and profoundly and terribly interested in this event. And I don't know that simply because they were angels, that they would have known exactly when it was going to take place. So I don't know how much of a surprise it was for them. But I have a sense that I was, I have a belief that I was very, very focused, that you were too, that we all were very focused on this circumstance and the impossible hope that this life and this mission would succeed, because everything depended on it succeeding.
Our next question is from 9-year-old Tavish from Provo, Utah, who asks, how did you know what you wanted to make?
Well, Tavish, I didn't. When I started out, I had just a little tiny sketch. I knew that I wanted it to be this river of angels and to be the birth of Jesus. But the way that I work is just to draw it to see what happens, and to draw the people to see who they are, and draw them to see how they're feeling. And so I kind of watch it. I kind of watch it happen. I look for it with my charcoal and with my paintbrush. The way that I work, I only have a vague hunch, and I have to find it physically by making it happen. And then if there's a problem with it, then I try to fix it. But yeah, it's an awkward way to work, to not know exactly where you're going when you get started. But it seems very consistent with a lot of things in life, that we don't know quite how they're going to end up, even though we've got to get started with them. So the answer to that is I don't know. I don't know where I'm headed, actually. Just a vague sense that it's over there somewhere.
Our next question is from 4-year-old Lincoln from St. George, Utah, who asks, why is baby Jesus so small?
Oh, Lincoln. I don't know how small you were when you were born, Lincoln, but you were little like that, and you were probably that alarming color too, or something like it. Babies, excuse me, babies when they're born are tiny, kind of impossibly and kind of frighteningly tiny, and Jesus' birth is often very bloody. He still has some kind of blood on his head, and Mary is sweaty, and Jesus is little because he was just born just a couple minutes ago, just barely born. And they're just little like you were just little, like I was just little.
Okay, we are moving to our adult questions. So here's a question from an adult. Could you explain the tears on the angels' faces?
Yeah. Now, first of all, I should say that I don't consider myself the last word on why anything is the way it is in the painting. I have an opinion, and I expect it's if you're interested in the painting, you would be curious about my opinion, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's right, or that your interpretation would be not every bit as useful as mine. But in my take on the tears in the angels, in some of them seem delighted and pleased. Some of them seem a little distressed. And it occurs to me that I mean, just like this is maybe too different a kind of circumstance. But if you can remember, you know, on your first day of school, you're so excited, it's coming. But then when you wake up on your first day of school, it's kind of terrifying, you know. And that happens all the time in our lives, that the thing we anticipate, the thing we're looking forward to, when it arrives, we start thinking, am I ready, you know? And these beings would have some sense, if not a very good sense, of the stature of who is now compressed into that little human body, that vulnerable human body. And I suspect that it would have been pretty terrifying to a lot of us. I mean, mixed in with the anticipation of the promised redemption, finally this event has arrived that is the ultimate expression of fidelity, where this promise has been there for thousands of years, and many prophets have never saw it. They just knew it was coming afar off, and that's true on the other side too. Angels, you know, people that had been born, people that hadn't, anticipating this thing that needed to happen, that when it arrived, it would also have been terrifying. And so I think some of them are just upset. They're just upset. I mean, not that they don't want it to happen, but we're not talking about a possibility anymore. We're not talking about an eventuality anymore. It's here, and he's there, and he's hungry, and he's dirty, and he's in one of these, you know. Are we sure this is a good idea? You know, that's why I made some of the angels reflecting some of that concern.
Our next question is from Claudia. She asks, how did you choose the fabrics for the women's clothes?
It's a fairly arbitrary process. The women's clothing, is that what she's asking? The men have some. It's just a matter of. It's just a formal decision to kind of make certain shapes advance and recede past others. But Joseph has a pattern on his clothing as well, and many of the angels, male and female, have patterns, and some of that is just to differentiate the different white plains. And those are not decisions. Those are decisions made more with my gut than with my head. There may be some really great reasons, but I don't know. The reasons are in my stomach and not in my brain. I try to paint more from a feeling here. I need my work to be smart, but I try to lead more from the middle of my torso than with my thinking. My work ends up being smarter when I do that.
Our next question is from Shauna, Bill, and Leanne. Their question says, my question has to do with Joseph. I'm wondering what feelings Joseph was having in this scene. I'm wondering too, but I have to admit that's a very autobiographical depiction of Joseph. You know, I mean, remembering myself at the births of my children and feeling overwhelmed and imagining how Joseph would have felt away from home, no room in the inn, first his wife had her first baby. You know, that I think he would have felt pretty overwhelmed. We don't get a lot of details about Joseph. But anyway, I hope I get to meet him someday. I have some questions about that experience for him, of his. Anyway,
I have a great love and admiration for him, even though I don't know anything about him.
Our next question is from Anna. She asks, why are there babies among the witnesses?
Yeah, I when I started out, there weren't, but similarly to, let me see, was it Olive's question about the puppies? I like babies too. I like puppies and I like babies. But one thing that happened is, as this river of angels was kind of crowding in order to kind of soften it, gentle it a little bit, the inclusion of children just added a certain sympathy, made it less of a less claustrophobic. And one thing too that, like some of the children are kind of distracted, as children are at critical events. The adults are wanting to show the children, the babies. There are a couple babies with white hair. Someone once explained to me that, oh yeah, the white-haired babies are, let me see, how did it go? The white-haired babies are post-mortal, and the color-haired babies are pre-mortal. I think that's a great explanation. I wasn't thinking about that. It felt more like it felt happier, communal, delightful, something you bring your children to. So.
Our next question is from Jennifer. She asks, did you paint people you know?
No, Jennifer. I occasionally, when I paint people, they look like people that I know, but I don't use models. I very, very rarely use models at all in any of my paintings. I mostly just kind of paint them to see who they are and see what they have to say to me. And so occasionally, as I say, occasionally they start looking like someone. Now when I drew the faces, they were all bald. I put in the hair later, but I left this one angel bald because Joe Ostroff, who was a colleague of mine who teaches full-time here, and did then too, came into the studio but when it was still a white canvas, and I just said, yeah, I think I'll put like the Holy Family here, and then just have this like river of angels just flowing over the top. And Joe said, oh, well, you've got to put in the midwives too. And as soon as he said it, it just seemed like there's nothing more obvious in the world that, as I was talking about before, that there would have been women attending her. And if there's a baby being born, it seems in most cases you would have to. I defy you to keep women from coming and helping this woman have her baby. And because Joe reminded me of that, and Joe is bald, I left one. It doesn't really look like Joe otherwise, but it's bald in honor of Joe's suggestion, which I felt like was a really critical one for the painting. Other than that, the resemblances are incidental. People have said, "Oh, my face is in there." I mean, certainly not on purpose. I don't include myself on purpose. I have done self-portraits, but I didn't do so purposefully in this painting.
Our next question is from Sybil, who asks, you paint on a monumental scale a lot. Did you ever complete the Crucifixion Painting started in Kanosh?
Yeah. Yep. It is a Descent from the Cross painting. This is Sybil, you said? I guess, do I know you, Sybil? You've seen the paint. You saw the painting in Kanosh? Can she respond to that? Anyway, I'll be answering, but see if she, yeah. Because it sounds like she saw it while it was in progress. And that painting is completed and is, and I believe will be has been exhibited here at the museum a few times, and I think will be again in the future, in a couple of years. We're talking about a show here. And that is a descent from the cross, kind of envisioned as, I mean, this painting has all of the anticipation and anxiety and optimism of a birth, and I wanted to do a painting that is like just the trough of that story when Jesus is dead and his disciples don't know what's going to happen in a few days. It seems like all is lost for them. So I wanted to investigate that part of the story too. And the whole time I was painting that, I kept on just kind of encouraging them. It's going to be okay. We almost can't read that story authentically in the scriptures because we know what's going to happen in a few days, and they didn't know. I mean, after he came to them, they said, "Oh," then they remembered what he had said. But Jesus said so many things to them that they didn't understand, that they didn't fathom that he meant that he was going to rise from the dead. That had not happened before. And so anyway, I think that's a really important story to tell too. And there is no good news of the gospel unless he died. I mean, the resurrection, of course, is vital, but the resurrection doesn't mean anything unless he was dead. And he was dead in the descent from the cross. He is dead. He's gone. All is lost at that point for them. And so, anyway, yes, I did finish that painting.
Our next question is from David Erickson Fine Art, who asks, have you ever felt the presence of heaven like when you made this piece? No. Well, frankly, this piece was special in that it was the first time I had undertaken a subject like this on such a monumental scale. And to work on a painting this size, while you're working on it, you can't see the whole thing. I mean, you're very much absorbed in the world of this painting, and it was novel to me at that point. It's happened a number of times since then, but it's never the first time. And so, this working on this painting was as I mentioned before, I was terrified going into it. It worked out. It worked out well. The painting communicated well to me. I had a great relationship with the painting. The response to it was very strong, and so from others too. So it was. But I whenever I paint anything, I'm kind of reaching for. I'm reaching out to touch the other world, and there was a particular flavor to that effort in making this painting. A very different one in working on the Descent from the Cross. A very different one in working on any of the hundreds of paintings done in between those two, But this one was special. I have to admit that. I missed working on it so badly that I started another one that is about 6 feet square. And I decided I'm never going to finish this one because I like working on, it's a nativity painting. So every year I get it out and work on it a little bit more, hang it up in the house. And because I miss that experience, so I just kind of I'll stretch that one out for the rest of my life. I don't know that I'll ever finish it. Don't know that I want to ever finish it. Our next question is from Wendy, who asks, why do you call them witnesses and not angels?
Part of that is that I don't know the distinction between beings of the other world. And I think we just lump them all into one category. And I don't know that they're all in one category. And so I have a sense that there are beings that help me, accompany me, witness me, approve or disapprove of things that I'm doing. And so I just use a more general term, witnesses. I assume some of them are angels too. Angels to me are kind of angelic messengers, and seem to have an assignment. I don't know, they all have an assignment. It's just for me, it's a more general term.
Okay, this is our last question.
Okay.
From 6-year-old Wade in Provo, Utah. And he asks, who are all the angels?
Who are they?
Who are they?
Oh, Wade, they are Wade, and they are everybody. I remember while I was working on the painting, people heard about it and came by the studio and come in to see it. And this man came in, and he told me about he was reading the story of the Christmas story to his little 4-year-old boy, and he talked about a multitude of the heavenly hosts, and the little boy said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Oh, it's a huge group of angels." And the boy said, "Well, who would that be?" And and his dad said, "Well, who would want to be there?" And the little boy said, "Everybody." So they are. If I have done my job right, Wade, it is you and all of you. So.
Thank you all for joining us tonight and for your engaging questions, interest, and participation. And a huge thanks to Brian Kershisnik for taking the time to answer our many questions.
Thank you.
We've loved learning from you. Remember that this event will soon be available on YouTube and on our website, moa.byu.edu, if you want to rewatch it or share it with a friend. I invite you all to come visit the BYU Museum of Art during this Christmas season to experience this beautiful painting in person. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas.